Welcome to the Zachrilege Cast podcast, YouTube video interview program that features me talking to some of the best and brightest in the atheist / secular / awesome community. This is episode number 144. I recorded my interview live on May 29th, 2018. I would like to thank Corey Johnston, host of many shows, but mainly the Brainstorm podcast, for letting me know that Canadians are cool and the water, the SJW is warm. Just shower first. Tonight I have a double interview. I was nervous about this one because I have yet to interview someone who has just graduated middle school. Kelly Helton is the equal rights advocate for the Tri-State Freethinkers. She snuck into a Planned Parenthood rally and has been a mainstay since. You've probably heard her talk about science, women's rights, and being an out and proud atheist. She's going to blow your socks off, so just take them off right now. Jim Helton is her dad, the national field organizer for American Atheists. If you blow up this organization because of David Silverman, I implore you to listen to this interview, then make your mind up. Last week was a talk on social justice theory. Tonight, you're going to see the reality. Transition music, you love it, you know it. I would like to thank Jim and Kelly Helton for being on the Zachrilege cast after speaking at multiple conferences, national and regional, appearing on international television and a Bill Nye documentary. This show is the logical next step. Welcome aboard, Kelly. I would like to start by using a quote you did at one of your speeches. This was at the Freedom from Religion Foundation. We are not damsels in distress tied to the tracks. We are the train. So you are the train. Can you tell me the story of how you snuck into a protest at the State House in Ohio?
Yeah, there was a protest at Ohio, and my mom didn't want me to go because there was counter-protesters and she thought it wouldn't be safe. But I really wanted to go, and I really wanted to do something. So when they were packing up the car, I hid in the backseat, crouched down in the car, and waited till you got on the highway, till he couldn't turn back because my dad was catching a bus. And halfway through the car ride, I popped down like I told you I was going. And when we got there, the counter-protesters kind of barged into the room, and we got separated. And I ended up by the podium next to all of the senators, and my dad was on the other side of the room. And my mom called my dad asking him if I stayed by him the whole time, and she saw a news article with me by the senators and my dad nowhere in sight. He got in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, since you have you had to get express permission since then to go to protests?
Yeah, but I usually get it.
Well, how old were you when you went to the first one?
I think around 10 or 11.
Well, that's pretty young to start as an activist. When did you decide that you wanted to be an activist? You wanted to go to protests and talk, kind of speak out?
Well, when I was 7 years old, I attended my first Tri-State Freethinker meeting, and Planned Parenthood was there talking about all the abortion bans and how people were just trying to defund Planned Parenthood. And my first question to my mom was, why do people hate Planned Parenthood so much? And in future meetings, I learned about other issues like in my community, especially in school, like sex ed and how poor it was, or Gideon's passing out Bibles, or I could sit for the Pledge of Allegiance. And after that, I just really wanted to get out and do something about these issues because they were personal and they were happening to me.
Yeah, I don't blame you, but it's a far cry going from just showing up at a protest and saying, I want to talk. When did you say, I want to talk do a speech, and what was it like for you to prepare to talk in front of a group?
Well, my first speech was at a Planned Parenthood rally at UC, and I had a note card with one sentence on it just saying how you should support Planned Parenthood. And on that day, I actually wrote my first rally sign that said, "You should protect the futures of the ones who need Planned Parenthood the most." And it took a lot for me to get up in front of those only like 12 people, but it started from like a one sentence speech to a 30-second speech, and it started to build up to standing in front of 15,000 people.
Yeah, it seems like that would be intimidating. How, like when you talk in front of big groups, how are you able to just focus and get out your words?
It takes a lot of practice making sure I know the speech, because when you get up there and you don't really know what you're saying, you start to mumble and stutter and you're not as passionate. But it takes a lot of work with my dad and I. We work really hard on my speeches and writing them and turning them into powerful speeches. And then we work on how I'm going to say them, because if you can't deliver it right, it's not as powerful. And we really work on how I say the words and getting emotions in there.
Well, why do you think it's important to speak out for girls, for women, and also non-believers?
I think if we start doing things instead of sitting around thinking about them, we can make change. And, our world needs a lot of change in it, and it starts out with just one voice.
Well, what is it like to get instant feedback when you're talking?
It's a little bit different. I'm more used to speeches, and it's kind of a different experience doing interviews, but I think it gets more, you kind of get more like feedback, and which is nice to know.
True, yeah, I was thinking of that. So, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Well, I was actually planning on doing something in a medical field, but everyone I talk to says I should do like run for office.
Well, I mean, you could start there. I don't know. I think we have doctors and such, some who don't seem to be too qualified in office right now. So, yeah, we definitely could use you in both areas. But how do you get you're able to get just such intensity and passion into your speeches? And I know people have been doing this for like 20 years who can't do it. How are you able to just show how much this means to you and to get your message across to people?
Well, these issues are personal, and I know people who these directly affect. And I just take that energy and that anger and everything, all these emotions from that, and just turn it into powerful words, like words that can make change. And these issues hit like personal to me, like things in schools, especially like with gun violence or sex ed. Those are personal things that are happening directly to me. And you just kind of channel that into a powerful speech that someone can take seriously.
And how important is it for you to see like results? Like you talked about at your school, it was like a choral thing, and there was like their religious songs, and you wanted to say, well, maybe we shouldn't have religious songs at a public school, and then to get that out, what does it feel like to actually see some change happen in your school?
Yeah, I mean, when I was singing those religious songs, it made me feel extremely uncomfortable. And I knew I wasn't the only non-believer, I guess you could say, in that room. And there was more than just Christians in that room. And it was getting so extreme to someone shouted out, "I feel like I'm in church." And I was like, this is unacceptable. And I was singing these songs for 3 years. And every year I would go up to my dad and I'd be like, "I don't like these songs." And he's like, "If you care enough, you'll do something about it." And I didn't do anything for 3 years because I was too scared that the teacher wouldn't do it. And I would just be sitting there and it'd be really uncomfortable and awkward and scary. But after 3 years, I decided I need to do something about this. So I went up to my teacher privately and I told her, "I'm not comfortable with this. And we shouldn't be singing religious songs in a public school." And she told me, "I don't want you to feel uncomfortable." And she also knew who my dad was and didn't want to get sued. But the next day, she came up to me and she said, "I changed the songs." And it felt really good to know that all I had to do was say something. I didn't have to sue the school or get my parents involved. I just had to tell her that these songs don't belong in a public school. And that works for other issues too.
Well, do you ever have issues, I don't know, with friends of yours just because you're not, you're an atheist, and I can't imagine that you're like in the majority on that side, and the fact that you've done these speeches and been so vocal, does that affect any of the friendships and relationships you have at school?
I've had a few friends who are a little weird with it because they're religious, but a lot of people in my school community, they all know that I am an atheist. And after a while, they realize you are the same person I knew years ago. And I feel like I've started to normalize the word atheist just in my school. And I get a lot of questions like that, especially from younger people in school, and they ask me, how do you deal with it? But I don't try to hide who I am. I don't try to closet being an atheist, and I'm very open about it, and I just try to be a good community member like everyone else, and they see atheists now, at least in my school and my grade, they see it as a normal thing, and no one's scared of it anymore.
Well, do you have any advice to give people about coming out as an atheist? And
I feel like people just have to be confident, because if they act scared, then people are going to jump on that, and they just need to be confident in what they know is true. Because it is scary, because, kids can be mean, and it's hard going in a school where most people are religious, but I think just being confident is a really good start.
Well, I'd like to know if I could possibly borrow your confidence sometime, just because you seem to have just a little extra, maybe. You might be able to share that with people. Well, thanks, Kelly, for being on. I'm just glad that you're out there and for being a voice of reason for adults. Now, I did invite your dad on as well, make it kind of a tag team thing. So this is kind of a question for both of you, and maybe to transition to talk to Jim about other stuff. What do you and Kelly do for fun that has nothing to do with activism?
Well, because
they have, first of all.
Yes. The nice thing is, because Kelly's getting requests all over the country and people fly her out, we usually have some off time in between flights or a day there where we'll go to a local museum, or we'll visit, we'll travel to some of the local sites when we travel. So it's nice being able to travel with Kelly and seeing the local sites wherever we go, if we have time.
And lots of board games.
And lots of board games. That's right. Lots of board games.
Is there a go-to game?
There's a too many. But what's your favorite board game?
Harry Potter.
Yeah, Harry Potter. Harry Potter, Bonanza. We play. I play a lot more than that, but board games is a good family event.
Is there like a favorite location that you've been to together, like a conference or something where you've been able to do the conference thing and then get to actually see the sites too?
What was your favorite conference?
Well, my favorite conference was American Atheists in Oklahoma, but the most kind of sites I got to think was in Milwaukee. Was when we went to the FFRF conference, and we got to see a lot of the sites around there, which was really nice to see. But my favorite conference was definitely the American Atheist one.
Excellent. Sounds great. Well, I don't know if Kelly, if you want to stay or stick around while I talk with you. Totally up to you. If you've had enough. Thank you for joining, and yeah, I'll be asking about that.
All right, thank you.
We're going to switch here.
Okay.
This is live podcasting, people. This is how it goes. Transitions aren't always the smoothest. So, hi, Jim.
Hello.
Welcome to the show. We've been looking at your ear for the first 15 minutes or so. Was the 2012 Reason Rally kind of the catalyst for you becoming an activist and getting the Tri-State Freethinkers off the ground? And also, what are the Tri-State Freethinkers?
Yeah, I mean, no doubt. The Tri-State Freethinkers didn't exist when I went to the Reason Rally. I went there in 2012 and just came back all inspired at all the possibilities and what was going on. And I couldn't seem to get local groups motivated to do activism. And I wanted that true sense of community. I always thought the one thing the church had over the atheist community was that true sense of community. And so I wanted to build a business model around that, to change the world around me and to build a community. And so I formed the Tri-State Freethinkers. I rounded up about 12 people to start. Fast forward 5 years later at 2,700 members and, one of the most active organizations in the country, which ultimately led to me getting a job at American Atheist, using that kind of as the business model.
Okay, so are you located in, is it Cincinnati?
Yeah, in the Cincinnati area, greater Cincinnati, which kind of covers northern Kentucky, part of Indiana, and Cincinnati.
Yeah, it's nice of you to cover 3 states there.
Yeah. I live in between the Creation Museum and Ark Encounter, to put that in perspective. So winning.
2 of America's greatest landmarks.
Yeah.
As, we'll cover that.
We'll get that. But with the Tri-State Freethinkers, the one thing we did is we based everything off our ACES program, which stands for activism, community service, education, and social. When I looked at groups around the country and I looked at best practices, the groups that were struggling only did one thing. Like they might have been purely social or just, one piece of that. The groups that were doing the best did 3, if not 4 of those ACEs. And that had that true sense of community and were making change and a difference in there. And so that's what we proceeded to build. And it's been very effective. On the activism side, we're affecting school board legislation. We're going after city councils and changing legislation. We're going in after state level legislation. Community service, I think the Tri-State Freethinkers did 53 projects last year for community service. They were Foundation Beyond Beliefs Community Service Leader, one of the year. American Atheist Activist of the Year. We do educational meetings. We take a different approach to that by bringing in guest speakers, multiple speakers to the same meeting to tackle different parts of the project. And then, just social events. Social is the number one reason people join groups, but it's also the number one reason groups go to die if that's all they're doing.
Good point, yeah. So where did the ACES model come from? Did you come up with that, or is it something like you've been working with some other people?
We created. We had the acronym came from a phone call I had with a board member, Mandy, where we had this and we were talking about all the things we were doing, and I rattled them all off, and she goes, "That's it, say that." And then we realized the activism, community, education, social, and that we just kind of got the acronym ACES from that, and then we shared that with, obviously gave that to American Atheists to spread around the country to let people adopt that model or parts of it. They don't have to take it all, but they can take parts that fit within their group, to use. Because I think the future of atheist activism is in the grassroots movement, is local groups going to their local school board, city councils, and depending on your state, going after state level legislation. That is the future.
Yeah, I was thinking in terms of like politics, being someone who's in Georgia, it always seems so right-wing that there's no way of turning it, but really it is. How do things get to the national level? Well, it starts locally, so yeah.
And it's a 2-part process, meaning you would think like in Kentucky, Kentucky's got some of the most strongest atheist free thought groups in the country because we need it. Arizona, strong groups. Alabama, if you look at states that have the most trouble, sometimes they have the strongest atheist communities. If you look at groups that are, there's states like, oh, we're fine, no one cares, they're not doing as much. But we want to change that too, because while they may not solve a need because everything's good in their state or their city, we can use those groups to propose legislation. So we can propose, and we are writing legislation that's never been written for protection for atheists, and non-religious discrimination, so that religion cannot discriminate against us. And that's the big thing. We are in spaces where religion's discriminating, and they are going after schools, city council, state. This is what religion's doing. They call it a blitz, their Project Blitz, where they're going after all these things, and we need to be in that space fighting for equal rights.
Yeah, what happened, so this is the state of Kentucky regarding like abstinence-only education and trying to remove it?
Yeah, it's not even Kentucky. There's only 13 states that require proper sex ed. Let me repeat that, 13. It is legal in the state of Kentucky to lie to children about sex. Example, teachers can say babies come from a stork that delivered on your doorstep, as long as they follow it by the sentence, don't have sex. That is perfectly legal to lie. They claim condoms have an 85% failure rate. My son raised his hand in his class and said, it's only 2% if you would teach us how to use them. My son's a little activist too, because in his school he passed out I Stand with Planned Parenthood shirts when the church came into the public school to teach it. And yes, churches come into public schools around the country to teach sex ed with no degrees, with no education. And this is who's teaching sex ed. And it's harmful. The states that teach this program have the highest teen pregnancy, the highest STD, and the highest abortion rates. Kentucky's in the top 10 because they do an abstinence till marriage program.
And you got that lovely governor, Matt Bevin, right?
Oh, Matt Bevin, yeah, the best of the best there.
Well, I want to talk about like a very successful campaign you had. So you kind of mentioned it before, but what is the Genocide and Incest Park?
So that is in retaliation to Ken Ham and the Ark Encounter, who Ken Ham built a $100 million boat as a replica of Noah's Ark. And we came late to the party, to be honest. We were originally going to do a billboard that said the main obstacle to equality is religion. And then marriage equality passed, so we were looking for something else to do. And someone suggested we should look at taking on the Ark Encounter. And so we researched it because it was already under construction before we were even, that big into activism. And we were horrified at what we found. And what we found was that atheist bloggers and a few people here and there were writing about all these things the Ark Encounter was doing, how it was anti-science, that, they wouldn't hire gay people, that they received up to $18 million in state tax funds, but still discriminating. They make you sign a vow of chastity if you're single, saying you can't have sex. They gave $100,000 in cash they received from the city. The list goes on and on of all the things they did. But the overall press, the mainstream media was positive. Like, this is a cool story. They're doing this $100 million project. And we wanted to change that story. And we were like, how do we do it? So we came up with the slogan, Genocide and Incest Park. And some people got offended by that. But if you think about it, give me another word that describes that story. Well, they have this right to build this project. It's a horrible family fun day. And what we did with that campaign was we grabbed the world's attention, not just people in Kentucky, not just nationally. We grabbed the world's attention. We had 6 documentary film crews there, including Bill Nye, multiple countries filming, ABC, NBC, Fox and Friends was shooting live, the New York Times, the Miami Herald, Washington Post. And after all that flood of interviews, and we didn't talk about the genocide and incest, we were talking about how it was anti-science and discrimination. We got our talking points in. We successfully changed the story where the majority of all the media was negative from that point. Even the Christian Times and the Christian Daily and the Christian Post was reporting about our protest and the problems we had with the Ark Encounter. So the first piece is mission accomplished. The second piece was the argument that we had, the 2 biggest ones were, one, we were just giving them press, but it was already an international story. We were just stealing their press. And 2, we were just appealing to our base. Like, Christians weren't going to be happy about this. We weren't going to change their mind. And they're right. We weren't trying to change Christians' minds. We were going after our base. And we were looking for the firebrand atheist activists who didn't know we were here and didn't know there were people willing to stand up. From that very first protest, we now have 2 state directors for American Atheists. We have 2 regional directors and 4 assistant directors, and a half dozen new groups started from people that were at that original protest. And these people are leading activists that are leading entire groups in cities and states now into activism. So it was a huge success from that. We originally thought it was a one-time thing, but as the further we got away from the story, from the opening day, we started to see the story start to veer more positive. And because of that, we decided to make it an annual event on the weekend of their grand opening to repeat it every year. And it's been a great event. We bring in national organizations from all over the country. This year we'll have American Atheists. The Black Non-Believers will be there. The Secular Coalition for America will be there. Seth Andrews of the Thinking Atheist will be there. The Phil Ferguson show is going to be the MC. I know I'm leaving out people because there's just so many that are coming. But it's an absolutely great event. We have a good time, and it brings out some of the best activists around the country.
Well, when is that?
It is July 7th, Saturday, July 7th at the entrance of the Ark Encounter. We will put up our 15-foot banner of Genocide and Incest Park at their grand entrance.
And what anniversary? Is this the
This will be their third. This will be our third protest, their second year anniversary.
Yeah, I was like looking at interviews that you did regarding this, and like I think 2016, so it's around the time.
Yep. Yeah, and to clarify one thing on the numbers, people think they're going bankrupt, which just isn't true. They generated $69 million in revenue in 2017. $69 million. Now they had $65 million in expenses, so their net profit wasn't very good, but they keep adding on to it. But people are visiting the Ark. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Now, the numbers are a lot less than what Ken Ham promised. He promised like 2 million or going on 3 million, and it didn't even get 1 million people. But it's still generating a ton of money, which is an issue. Now, the cities and counties are on the verge of bankruptcy because they're not benefiting from it because they gave too much away because of all the deals they gave away. But the Ark is a cash cow. It's generating money. It is not going bankrupt like some people think anytime soon.
Can you tell the story of how porta potties got involved in the original test?
I never thought this would be an issue, but because we were doing this out in the field, there wasn't sidewalks, there wasn't anything really there. We called a porta potty company, and this porta potty company said, "Oh, we got plenty available." And when they found out what it was for, I said, "This is what it's for. Here's what it'll be." He goes, "Please hold." He came back on 5 minutes later and said, "I'm sorry, we're full for the summer. We have nothing available." And so we were like, okay. So then we contacted a national company who subcontracted it out, and they arranged for us to get a porta potty. And the driver pulling up to where we were called and said he wouldn't deliver it to atheists protesting the Ark Encounter, and he pulled off and left. And the local company would not deliver. Another company would not deliver to us on the day of the protest. So we end up having a driver drive us to a gas station. They ended up having porta potties next to that gas station, and it was the same company who denied us because he didn't want to be associated with us. So we had all the famous atheists that were there take pictures and post them on Facebook with his sign of all the atheist signs standing next to his porta potty company.
Now, has there been any like lawsuits involved with that?
We got we wrote a letter. We got a really good apology from the parent company, that were very upset that we were discriminated against and promised, that they would reconcile this right away. Our money was refunded. It would have had to pull multiple companies in. And with all the things we were doing, we decided not to pursue litigation. We could have, but it would have pulled that other company in who really didn't do anything. It was the base company. So we decided not to pursue litigation at that time, although we could have. I think if we would have contracted directly with that company, we would have.
Okay, I just remember you talking about that in a previous interview and wanted to see,
Yeah, we sent some letters, and we had some attorneys write some letters for us, but like I said, we chose not to litigate it. We were happy with the response the parent company gave us, who responded right away. And even not only did they, normally you get attorney letters, they called me right away. Like my phone rang, and they end up calling me and apologizing and sent me a nice letter, and we end up being happy with that.
Have you already reached out for porta potty needs for this year?
You know what? We gave up on it, and we just have a volunteer because there's a gas station that's just a quarter mile away or less, and we just have a gas station shuttle. We support the local business. Grab a candy bar and a Gatorade and use the bathroom and come back to protest. So we just have a shuttle driver, just shuttle it. It's much easier than renting a porta potty for a couple hours. And we just have a volunteer bathroom driver, and we've had a couple of them, and they've been great volunteers, which we really appreciate doing that.
Excellent. Well, how did you initially get hooked up with American Atheists, and how can you describe what you do as a national field organizer?
Sure. The first how it is, Edwin Kagan, who died several years ago, was their legal counsel who lived 5 minutes from me. And he's the one that sent me to the Reason rally. And he got on the phone and said, Jim, I invited him over for dinner. And he's like, you need to be state director. And if anyone knew Edwin, I'm like, okay. So next thing you know, I was the Kentucky state director. So I got American Atheists very involved in the ARC protest because of that, and my volunteer work here. But I had a 10-year plan with Tri-State Freethinkers to make this business model duplicatable around the country. But with the current political environment, with Donald Trump and the Christian right just hijacking our politics, I wrote a proposal and a business plan to American Atheists and said, I have this plan. I will give this to you. You just need to hire me to implement it. At the federal level, you could say that, it's very tough out there. I think the future of atheist activism is going after state level legislation where we can, going after city councils and going after school boards, creating momentum, affecting elections. Non-religious is the number one voting bloc. It's bigger than evangelicals. We need to organize under the banner of equality. If you discriminate, we can't vote for you. And use that hashtag atheist voter. And let's make a true grassroots movement. This is something I know how to do. And you should hire me to do it. And they got back to me very shortly and said, we agree with you. This is a direction we need to go, and we will give you resources to do so. And I've been implementing the plan ever since. And we've been creating this and creating the documents. When I came on board, we had less than 10 active directors. Now we have over 50. We have over 200 affiliates, and we're just starting. I mean, we're just getting ramped up. I had to build the foundation for state directors first. And once we have those state and assistant directors going out there, you're going to see a big push to our affiliates at the end of this year, beginning of next year, to really get our affiliates involved.
Well, how do you work with, I guess, the state directors, and how do you find people to do this?
Basically, one is like this, by doing shows like this, of putting out there that, we want an assistant, we want a state director in every state. We want an assistant director in every city. If you're part of a group and want to get, active, contact me. We would love to talk to you. Our structure is this. We have regional directors that cover multiple states. We have state directors that cover the states and then that go around the state. And then we have assistant directors, which just focus on their city, which is very, a lot easier for a lot of people to do. And they focus on their group. And what we are doing now is providing resources to those affiliates and to those directors. So if you're going to march in Pride Parade, we have some of the best signs out there. It says, when equality is under attack, atheists show up. And that was a quote by the state director of Planned Parenthood at the ARC protest. We will give you these signs for free if you're going to march in Pride. If you're going to march and protest the Westboro Baptist Church or any issue that's important to you, we will send you signs. We will send you stickers, buttons. We will help you with the press release. We'll help you with media training. We can train you to do speeches. Just like if you look at Kelly as a reference, she was afraid to speak to anybody. Her first speech was one sentence, was all she could muster. We'll train you on public speaking, how to deal with the media, how to get press coverage. We want to provide resources to these local groups. And we have a series of toolkits so they can pick what issue they want to go after locally that's affecting them, and we will help them go do so.
Well, if Kelly's an example of a graduate of these techniques, I think that's pretty much the best selling point you have.
Yeah, I mean, she went from, like I said, 12 people to 15,000 crowds. And it's not just speaking. We're doing lobby training. She's lobbying senators. She's lobbying the House of Representatives. And she's grabbing their attention. Like, when she went up there and spoke against the 6-week abortion ban, all the senators were on their phones. They weren't paying attention. She was 12 at the time. And they all put down their phones and didn't know what hit them when she started speaking. And they started answering questions, which she answered. And it had an impact. And then she just graduated middle school. And like one of the House of Representatives, how they sign a letter, like to all the graduates. And she got this award. And she's like, I know that guy. I met him. Here's what I talked to him about. And that was pretty neat, when she was talking to her class about those things. But we need to be out there in the streets, doing activism, and it's effective. We change policies. And if Kelly can do it at 13 years old, I would say anybody around the country listening to this can do the same. It just takes one voice to stand up and say enough, and it can have a ripple effect of change around your community.
The coughs happen. It's totally cool. Now, I don't think any atheist group has been associated with a personality as much as American Atheists was associated with David Silverman. How tough is that for the group to kind of move forward and to continue with all the momentum that's been gained? Okay.
Well, the movement isn't about one person. It's about the movement and an organization. And to be honest, while it was very unfortunate and tragic of things that happened, it's been a hiccup. We've been moving forward. We brought on a dozen directors since then. We brought on multiple affiliates. People are standing by us. The board has been fantastic on the way they handle things and the staff. And our programs are in effect. We're implementing them, and it hasn't. You would think that this would be, really hurt us, but to be honest, it hasn't. We are going to be stronger and better than ever, and our programs are being implemented. And the last thing I'll say, like with any organization, when these things happen, you are judged by the way you handle it as an organization. And I think the board has done a fantastic job, and we have a great staff here. And I think that's why we're getting such positive feedback, and people continue to want to work with American Atheists and be affiliates and sign up as directors. But it hasn't slowed us down at all.
How has Ed Buckner been during this transition, since he is local to me? He's in Atlanta. And he's the president, right?
Yeah, he was an existing president. I just spoke to him this afternoon. He's an interim executive director, so he brings that calm, and we're thrilled to have him on board. And he's temporary until we find a new president, and the board. That's not staff's job, that's the board's job. So, like I said, we have a board going to be either starting, if they haven't already, starting an active search looking for a new president. So over the next couple months, I'm sure you'll be hearing more about that, and that'll be open for people to apply to.
Well, you've kind of talked about this before, but how is it going to be possible to get free thinkers to coalesce into a political force? American evangelicals aren't that big of a group, but in the early 80s and the 70s, they really got it going, and now it seems like politicians bow to them. How do you create, an organization that does that, except we actually have value?
Yeah, I think it's a two-step process. The reason evangelicals, they have an 86% voter turnout, and even though they're not the largest voting bloc, if you want to appeal to the evangelicals, what do you have to do? What's their one issue?
Jesus.
Yeah, but what abortion? That's it. And so people know that, so they can cater to that. The atheist community needs to become single issue voters. We have to be associated with a single issue, and I propose that single issue be equality. If you're not for equal rights, we can't vote for you. If you discriminate, we can't vote for you. That's a very simple message that people understand. We cannot allow discrimination. Now, if you delve down into that equal rights issue covers dozens of issues. It's very broad, but we single it to a single point. You can't discriminate. And if we do that, then people start to cater to us. The other thing we need to do, and which we are doing at a national level, is providing support to actually go like what the Christian right have is, while they're proposing all these anti-abortion bills, they're proposing all these religious discrimination bills, we have to be proposing bills for equality. You can't discriminate against the LGBT. You must teach proper sex ed. We must be pro-science. And so we have to be proposing our own legislation, and we have to get local groups to do it, and we support them to give them the tools and resources and counsel to do so. And we are doing those two things as we speak. It's just at the beginning stages, but as this picks up, as this goes on, we are the number one largest voting bloc if we start to vote, but we don't vote as a bloc, and we don't vote the way the evangelicals do. So once people realize they can make change, we will be that voting bloc, and it should have a huge impact on elections in future.
Can it be frustrating to see that even the Democratic Party, everybody's saying, oh, the Democratic Party is going to save us in the midterms, but they're also kind of clinging to the religion side as well. How do we get them to kind of listen and see that we're out, we exist, and we can vote and make a difference?
Yeah, and we're a nonprofit, so we're not Republican, we're not Democratic, Libertarian. What we're basically saying is, for any candidate from any party, is here's what we're going to hold you accountable to. And because if we become such a force in such a large voting bloc, we hope that multiple parties cater to us. The religious rights hijacked the Republican Party. The Democratic Party has its issues as well, but this model doesn't rely on any one party. This route law says, hey, here is our voting bloc. We can affect elections. And if you are a candidate that's for equal rights, I don't care what your party is, we'll vote for you. If you discriminate, no matter what party you are, we will not vote for you. And that is the goal.
So I guess as a non-profit, you're probably not looking to help get candidates for local, I guess, anything.
Yeah. So what there's a couple parts of this, and one of them is we want to work with candidates. We want to work with politicians on issues. So, like, for example, if we agree on sex ed, I want to work with that politician on sex ed. If I agree on LGBT issues or medical, whatever we agree on, we'll work with them. If our people want to run for election, that's great. We encourage any affiliate or any member to run for election. But once they start running, I personally can't help them, but there are resources out there to do so. But most people don't want to run for election. But what we found is you can influence elections by showing up and using your group and your numbers as a force to hold these candidates accountable. Justin Scott does a great job in Iowa of calling out candidates on issues. So that's the approach that we want to take, is to influence elections. And it's a bonus if somebody wants to run, but we know most people won't.
What am I missing out as an American Atheist member who basically just paid my $35?
I'm sorry, what's your question?
Well, I meant as a member, I don't know. What am I missing out on? I just signed up for it last year.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't really done anything with it. And it feels weird because I'm like, I've liked what the group's about, but I'm just like, okay, I'll give you, a tax deductible donation.
Well, we appreciate the donation, and it's going to doing the work like we've been talking about over the last, few minutes or so. What we would ask is help us get connected with the local community there. That is probably our biggest challenge. Is we have good people, we have good groups doing things, but we're not as connected as well. So we're looking for people that can help connect us with those local groups, with those local activists that want to do something, so that we can start providing you, your group, resources to do these things. And that's for anybody listening, is reach out to me. We need to get connected with these groups. We are not connected to the affiliates and to groups around the country near the way we want to be. So that is our biggest challenge, and that would be our ask as any of our members. Help us connect with you, and help us reach out to us and help us connect with the local groups.
Well, have there been any, states where it's been hard to find people?
Yes. I mean, we have states where we have nobody. One of the states was Mississippi. We had no one. In Indiana. Now we talked to a couple groups. I planned a trip to Mississippi. We had our first person apply for assistant director, which I'm very excited about in Mississippi. Indiana last year, we had 0 affiliates or directors. Now we have multiple affiliates and brought on a director. Other states, like Colorado has no directors. There's several states out there where we have nothing. And then there's states like Kentucky that have 6 or 7. Texas has 5. Virginia, West Virginia have several each. So we're excited about these states. And usually where you get a good state director, they're bringing on assistant directors, and then it's a snowball effect. They just keep bringing on additional directors in the city, and then the affiliates are getting more involved, and you're starting to see state legislation. And we're starting to see that snowball build in several states, and it's very exciting.
Well, what's coming up next for the Tri-State Freethinkers?
Well, the Tri-State Freethinkers, our biggest thing is we have the Ark Encounter protest coming up July 7th. I mean, that is our biggest thing that we have coming up.
Do you find it in general? I mean, you kind of mentioned this earlier. Like states that are more blue, you have trouble finding volunteers just because everything seems to be okay in, say, Vermont.
Yeah. And so we want to go to those states, though, and say, hey, we may not have to fight a lot of things in your state, but let's propose things in your state. Like, give you an example, the Patient Right to Know Act. What if you went into a hospital or to one of those fake clinics and said, you have to disclose what medical things you will not perform based on your religion? So we won't tie your tubes at this hospital. You can't get an abortion. And that has to be posted and written notification. What would that do? I mean, that's huge. And in those types of states, if we have people willing to fight for that legislation, we have a good shot at getting it passed. We're in Kentucky, 0 shot. But in some of those very, progressive areas there where we have good groups and good legislators, we should be going after legislation just like that will not allow religion to discriminate. Let's pass LGBT non-discrimination ordinances. Let's do comprehensive medically accurate sex ed, K through 12. Let's do these things in those states. So that's why even in the states that don't think they have to fight church-state separation, we really want to get them gearing towards putting positive legislation that can be a role model for the rest of the country.
Sounds good. Well, gosh, we've zoomed through the time. Of course, having Kelly on limited your time, but I know you like sharing the stage. Is there anything I didn't talk about? And of course, tell everybody where you can find, Tri-State Freethinkers and American Atheists. Anything else that you'd like to plug?
The Tri-StateFreethinkers.com and then atheist.org. My contact information is on there. If you are an activist or with a group, please reach out to me. I would love to speak with you. And if you're doing good things, I'd love to hear what you're doing, because I'd like to share those success stories and learn from what groups are doing around the country.
Well, that sounds great. Well, thank Kelly for me. It was great to have her on. I know it's a little bit different doing an interview versus doing a speech, but I think she did great. And I'm glad, because sometimes people can say, oh, an atheist talked to a politician, and you think, oh, white dude. And then you have a 13-year-old girl talk the issues and know the issues is great. Yeah. So I'm glad to see that things seem to be going well.
I'll share one story with you since you mentioned that. She was talking to the senator because my senator wouldn't meet with me anymore. So somebody else sent an email saying, hey, there's a student going to be in the area on this date. They would love to meet with you. Their office got back to her within 5 minutes. And so she had an appointment. And when we walked in, they immediately knew who I was and just gave me the look. And she was explaining sex ed to the senator. And the senator interrupted her and said, honey, I know you're very passionate about this issue, and you have strong opinions on it. And she goes, Senator, these aren't my opinions. These are the facts. And I wish I had a camera, because it was just absolutely fabulous. Where she stood up to a senator who, about sex ed. And like I said, we need more people doing that very thing.
Pretty impressive. I almost forgot. We have to get at the end of the episode a little bit of levity. Do you have a joke to share?
I did not come prepared for a joke, and I have several, but I am going to fail in that. I did not come prepared for a joke that was even semi-appropriate.
Well, I don't know what's not appropriate in this show, but yeah, last week I came up with something, and this week it was like, oh, holiday weekend. Oh, great, interview time. Oh, yeah. So maybe I'll throw one in post.
Well, if I think of one, I'll send it to you to do a post edit.
Sounds good. Well, thanks to, of course, Kelly, and thank you to Jim Helton for being on American Atheists, Tri-State Freethinkers, and party on, everybody. Transition music. Live read. It's critical to get some sunlight on the YouTubers doing good work. Chrisiousity, who's been interviewed on this very show, just did a 30-minute show on real peer review. If you don't know what that is, think of the lulz crowd that helped spur on that thing called the conceptual penis. She called the group out for the thoughtless right-wing sycophants that they are, and after getting a boatload of feedback, brought on atheism's favorite living in Germany sociologist Christy Winters to talk about it for 2 hours. So that's 2 shows. I'll include the links, and it's good to hear a more regular Chrisiousity. Oh yeah, if your first comment on someone calling out your bullshit is lulz your voice, you might have shitty arguments. If you want to support this show, be like Bobby, Hugh, Toady, Larry, Daryl, and the other Daryl, and I forget which one of those is me, and support this show on Patreon. Patreon.com/Zachrilege. Follow the Zachrilege account on Twitter, like the Zachrilege Cast page on Facebook, and send all mail to zachrilege.cast@gmail.com. Thank you to Kelly and Jim for being on tonight. If you think you can't make a difference, I just showed you a 13-year-old young woman who lectured a senator on sex education. You got this. Stay frosty, my friends.